All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Amaya Stecker. I'm with the Resource Development Department at National PTA. We're very excited to kick off our Learning Labs series. And this is our first one, so thank you all for joining us. Learning Labs are a sponsored educational series on a variety of topics of importance to PTA leaders, members, and parents. All Learning Labs are sponsored sessions, and National PTA does not endorse any commercial entity, product, or service. No endorsement of sponsored companies is implied. Today, we're going to learn from the president of Booster, this session's sponsor, Stephen Murray, about how to make a stronger connection between your cause and campaign so that your message and mission are felt throughout your fundraisers. You will leave with a 5-step fundraising framework to more strategically raise funds for a better future, even during these times. I'm excited to introduce you to Booster's president, Stephen, who joined Booster within its first decade. Since then, Stephen has led and influenced every aspect of the organization. He's played executive roles on HR, sales, and operations, making him the perfect president for Booster. As an active member in the greater Atlanta community, Stephen serves on the board of his children's school, his local YMCA, as well as an advisor to a nonprofit that supports social good entrepreneurs. He has a big heart to improve organizations through effective leadership, developing team members, and putting people first. A self-admitted fitness junkie, Stephen is an accomplished athlete, completing marathons, even an ultra marathon, and an Ironman triathlon. He and his wonderful wife, Brittany, have 3 incredible children. I'll allow him to take over for the next 30 minutes. We will have Q&A available, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A, and we'll try to answer them at the end of the session. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Amaya, and a big thank you to the National PTA. We've enjoyed a great friendship with the National PTA over the years, and unfortunately, obviously, with no national convention this summer, we hope next summer to be back and hosting like we've done in the past. So just thank you. Really is a privilege and an honor to be here to share about a topic that I'm really passionate about. So let me say this just from a housekeeping standpoint. I'm going to be sharing a lot of slides that you will get at the end of the presentation. But as I share them, I have spent countless hours on Zoom the last 6-7 months, as many of you have. So I know sometimes when you share slides, there's just a lot of content that you have to sit through. So a little Zoom hack, if you don't know this yet, go to viewing options. And if you scroll down on viewing options, you can select side by side. And that allows you to see my presentation and myself speaking at the same time. So to break up some of the monotony of sitting on a 30-minute Zoom session, I recommend doing that. So let me do this. I'm going to show a picture real quick as my slides get up on the screen for you. Everybody should see this, of my family. And I show this, yes, because I love to show them off, but also just to kind of connect the dots that this topic is something that I'm not only just passionate about because of my 9 to 5 with Booster, but also because of my 5 to 9, where we spend a lot of times around the dinner table talking about fundraising in these times with schools, because my wife is actually our kids' school nurse. So in this pandemic time that we're facing, these tough times of trying to get students back on school, my wife is getting to experience really why we need to be raising funds to begin with, whether that's PPE or getting technology to students that are in a virtual environment. And as you see, we have 3 beautiful kids. Not featured is our quarantine puppy that we got a couple of months ago, but 3 beautiful kids, pre-K, my 4-year-old, a 1st grader, and a 5th grader. So again, not just conference room table conversations for me at Booster of how do we raise schools money, but also dinner table conversations at home of just this chaotic world as you all are experiencing right now, and the pressure that it's putting on education systems and schools all across the world. So this is my, that's my family. This is my work family. Let's see if we can go to the next slide here. There we go. So this is Booster, and some of you may be familiar with what we do, but we've been around the last 18 years, started in 2001, and we've had just an amazing opportunity to partner with schools all across the nation. And over the beginning years of Booster, what we primarily focused on was coming on campus and doing fun runs for schools. But really over the last 7 years, what we've really focused on is going a little bit broader than that and helping schools plan and execute meaningful campaigns, fundraising campaigns. And meaningful really mean that across the board. We want it to be a community engaging event where all stakeholders are really enjoy the process. And then we want it, again, not just to be a fundraiser for the students, but we want it to be impactful for the whole student. So whether that's character development, teaching character lessons along the way, or if it's doing fitness events, whether that is a fun run or indoor dance fits, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Some of our stats, just to highlight, over the last 18 years, we've profited $400 million for schools, which is a number that continues to climb, which we're really encouraged by. We've run 17,600 individual campaigns for schools, 11.5 million students served, 23 miles run by those students that participate in our Fun Run program. And then we've served schools in all 50 states. And so the impact has just continued to grow for us, and we really enjoy what we get to do. But why I'm really here talking with you today is to talk about what we've learned really since March. And this is something that's been a challenge for all of us. And it's been something, though, that we've just continued to try to just press in and learn each campaign that we've run. And we've seen the full spectrum, whether that's schools and students that are on campus that have partnered with us, or if that's schools that are 100% virtual and doing distance learning. And so this fall alone, in these times, we have served 882 fall schools. That's 546,000 students, and have profited schools 7.5 million in local school profit. And so again, we're learning a lot. And this is not, let me just come out and say it, this is not a booster sales pitch. What we recognize is that we are all in this together. And so our hope, and why Amaya wanted us to kick things off, is to really walk you guys just through what we've learned. And hopefully you can take that as we pop the hood for you all, and you can implement that with your schools or your local schools, whether you're represented at the state level or if you're a local PTA chair or president. Just take this information and utilize it and implement it. If you'd like to talk with somebody at Booster, we'd be happy to do that. But we know right now the world is fast and furious, and many of you are looking at budget deficits or certain things you need to raise money for. And this information, we believe, can be helpful for you as you think about fundraising this fall or into the spring. So let me do this. Let me zoom out a little bit before I talk more specific nitty-gritty about what we've learned this fall. Let me just talk about why we fundraise. Any nonprofit. Why does any nonprofit fundraise? Why do you need to fundraise? Why do other nonprofits need to fundraise? I serve on a couple of nonprofit boards as well as my kids' school, and so all nonprofits have to fundraise. And so why do they do it? And the simple answer is, I describe it this way, is that ultimately every nonprofit has a cause, and that's the compelling purpose of your organization. So why do you exist? What are you going after to do? What is your mission? What is your purpose? The compelling purpose. Every nonprofit has one. And then over in the distance, you have capital. So you have cause and capital. Capital is a person or an organization that is willing to financially fuel and support your cause. And as all of you have experienced, this is the challenge and this is the divide, that the pursuit of that cause, the pursuit of a good cause, will always outpace your present resources. So there is a need then to go out and find that capital to ultimately, again, fuel the cause. And that is the fundraising gap. And what's challenging right now in these times, and why fundraising is so difficult, and why a lot of schools are unfortunately deciding not to fundraise, is because the capital, when we're in the midst of a recession and people are losing their jobs, and you're not able to see people physically in person maybe as often as you typically would on your school campus, the capital feels further away. And at the same time, though, the paradoxical nature of this is the cause is all the more bigger, right? We're seeing the education crisis and the impact that is being caused and disrupted by this pandemic that is ultimately becoming very destructive. So the disruption of the pandemic is turning then destructive on school campuses. And we're seeing this all the time, right? With students not having access to being able to be educated because they don't have Wi-Fi or they don't have computers, or we're seeing children really struggle socially, emotionally, mentally across the board. So the cause is getting bigger. It's only getting bigger in these times, yet the capital seems further away. And so that is the challenge we find ourselves in, and ultimately Booster has tried to solve for in this season of COVID-19. So let me walk you through the 5 steps of how we think about it. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break down each step, and I'm gonna share some key learnings, some insights that are different in this environment. And so again, just some stats, some figures, and then I'll give some best practices, things that we've implemented that we've seen successful, and other schools that have implemented that we've seen to have success, again, that you could take notes on. And if you just implement one of these things and it can help you have a more successful fundraiser, then this is a win for me. So we talked about cause and capital. What's in between? The campaign is the first step, right? You have to have an event or an activity that builds urgency and anticipation. So, if you just have a Give Now button on your PTA website or your school website, and that's open 365 days out of the year, not a lot of people are just gonna, wake up one morning and say, I'm just gonna go give to the local PTA or a local school. You have to have a campaign that creates that urgency and that anticipation amongst all stakeholders, families, teachers, admin, relatives, and whatnot. So you got to decide on a campaign. Once you have a campaign, right, then you decide, and again, I'm just putting words on things that you're probably often doing, but once you decide on your campaign, for us, it's our Boosterthon, which again could be a fun run, it could be a dance fit, it could be a bunch of different things, usually a 2-week, 3-week period. Then you go and you mobilize your campaigners, obviously starting with your PTA or your parent group, but that can obviously go out further than that. And that is a committed or connected individual who multiplies your campaign. So this is where you get that exponential growth, the multiplication effect of your campaign. Those campaigners then use different channels, and that's social, it's your giving portals or platforms. Back pre-COVID, it was actual gatherings and meetings. You use different channels. It's the platforms you use to actually engage, usually digitally or physically, your sources of capital. Again, a person or organization that is ultimately going to support. So these are the 5 C's, as I like to call it, of successful and effective fundraising. And again, in some ways, if you take nothing else away other than just, you could use this as a diagnostic tool. You could take this to your PTA board and say, hey, President of Boosterthon just gave this to me, and let's go through and see how we're doing in all 5 of these areas. So I think it's a really helpful framework that you can use to think about raising money. So these 5, again, we've had to adapt each of these 5 in these pandemic times. And again, across the full spectrum, whether that's schools that are virtual or schools that are on campus and everything in between, every school is facing something different challenges. So let me talk with you, and this is where we're going to camp out. Let me talk with you about the key insights and the best practices of each of these 5. So again, a cause, the compelling purpose of your organization, the 2020 insights. I said this earlier on why the cause is more meaningful than ever and more important than ever, but we are facing the biggest educational crisis in modern history. And there's starting to be more that's coming out about this, about the impact that, whether it's economic, again, social or mental, we're seeing child abuse is going up because schools is the place where child abuse can be reported, but if students aren't going on campus. So again, we are facing across the board, whether it's on the education front, or the way that schools are really the hub in society for the next generation, and the disruption that they're experiencing. We are facing the biggest educational crisis in modern history. So our cause of why we do what we do as a parent group, or for us as a fundraiser for parent groups, has never been more important. You're experiencing this, you're seeing this with your teachers, with your assistant principals, with your principals across the board. School leaders are growing increasingly fatigued and apathetic. Plans are changing by the week. My wife, who I mentioned earlier, is a school nurse. They see a COVID case, and then obviously you have to quarantine the entire classroom. And so for teachers and for administrators to try to keep up with these changes is just wearing them out. And often we're seeing apathy just set in, where there's a lack of motivation to really educate. And then 3, and this is the encouraging news, I think people are recognizing this, but more parents want to help, but they don't know how to help. They don't know what they're allowed to do, what they shouldn't do, what's appropriate in these times. So we are seeing parents want to help, even if they're stressed, even if they have a lot going on, as we all do, but they need clear direction. So this is kind of big picture 3 here. We're in a huge educational crisis that's putting pressure on our school leaders, and parents are on the sidelines and want to help, but they don't know how. So here's just a couple best practices as you think about your purpose as a PTA, or your purpose as an administrator, is to make no distinction between parent group and admin initiatives. I think pre-COVID, you could have your PTA over here, your parent group over here, you can have your administration, and again, those relationships were strong, but often it was clear that the PTA could focus on this and the admin needed to focus on this, and fundraising initiatives and different things were often siloed. But I think it's really important in these times that there's total alignment amongst the parent group and the admin on different initiatives and resources that are being shared. Now, again, doesn't mean that the purposes need to be the same, because obviously PTAs and parent groups serve a different purpose than the admin, but there needs to be alignment, and families need to see that alignment, where maybe in years past that wasn't as quite as critical in getting that messaging home to families. Number 2, and this is big, and this is where I get disheartened as a professional fundraiser, is we're seeing a lot of schools opt to only look at their present needs and not necessarily go to the long term of, again, some of this disruption and destruction that I was just alluding to is gonna impact their schools in 2021 and 22. And so often schools are rolling over budgets from their PTA fund from the end of the spring, and they're rolling over to the fall, and especially in virtual schools, they're saying, well, we don't really have that much discretionary needs right now because we're not doing as many enrichment programs, and we're not doing as many events, or any events for that matter. And so they're saying, hey, I don't need to fundraise. But we've challenged those school leaders to say, and those parent groups to say, hey, really look to the future and see what your long-term needs are going to be coming out of this. Often public school budgets, right? You guys know how the process works, but everybody is saying now, because of the economic and taxable income situation right now, that school budgets will be cut long-term. Usually they don't feel the effect of that. Districts don't feel the effect of that for a trailing 12 or 24 months. So there will be enormous needs, even if they're not felt right now. So to really look forward to what those needs may be. And then lastly, we have used the adage before, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think it's really important now more than ever that as a parent group and as a school, we're sharing stories, we're showcasing stories of the impact that you all are having and the needs that are out there from a cause standpoint. So just a reminder, sometimes we need to be more about the storytelling than the spreadsheets as a parent group. And so to really be thinking about stories that you can tell of cool things that have happened or potential needs that you're seeing. All right, so that's cause. Let me get a little bit more tactical for you here. and share some stats. Next up is campaign. So again, an event or activity that builds urgency and anticipation. So here's what we're learning right now in 2020. And again, some stats. So what we do as a team here in Boosters, we have all of this data. I shared some of the really big, impressive stats of how many schools we work with, how much money has been through our system that we're profiting schools. And our kind of single source of truth metric that we look at is the same schools that ran last year with our program. If they ran again this fall, how are they doing financially with their campaign with us compared to last year, right? So what we're seeing across the board on average is that distance learning campaigns, so distant learning schools, family participation in the program, in the campaign, is down 60% year over year. So 60% less than last year. And I'll talk about going kind of some of the bad news right now. I'll talk about some of the good news that we're seeing as well in a little bit. But on the on-campus side, if you represent a school that is on campus, again, even if that's no volunteers allowed on campus, no families allowed on campus, we're seeing participation down only 10% year over year. And there's obvious reasons for that, right? In terms of engagement of school to family with on-campus versus virtual. So, in some ways, as we walked into the fall and thought about how we were going to fundraise, we thought, distance learning would be doing better than 60% down. And unfortunately, obviously, it is 60%, so not as good as we thought, but we thought on-campus would be a lot worse. And we're because of the economy, and 10% year over year. That's pretty encouraging. And then the big thing, this is the make or break, and especially with distance learning programs and distance learning schools, is that admin and teacher buy-in is critical, absolutely critical in driving participation. So if you're thinking about doing a fundraiser, it is really imperative that this fall that you get admin and teacher buy-in. That goes back to the alignment piece and initiative piece I was talking about on the last slide, but it is critical. I mean, we're seeing some campaigns do a lot more than they did last year, and that's because they have admin and teachers really bought into what's happening. And in often cases, for the PTA, that's the only way, through the teachers, is the only way to get messaging home and to ensure that it's actually being delivered, whether that's, again, in virtual environments via Zoom classrooms or whatnot. So super important. So some best practices here. Link your fundraising goal to a tangible school improvement. This matters so much in these times. Often, I think sometimes as parent groups, we can get obsessed about the goal and not talk about what the visible representation of that goal means, what you're raising money for, and the impact and the stories that you can tell about that. I know my 11-year-old, my oldest, who's a soccer player. I remember one of his first soccer seasons when he was, I think, 5 years old. I coached his team. And at the end of the season, we handed out participation trophies. And he was just over the moon excited that he got a trophy. I think it never really dawned on him that he would get a trophy at the end of the season. So 3 months later, I was coaching his team again for his next season. And after the first practice, the first question that came out of his mouth was, "Hey, Dad, when am I going to get my trophy again?" And this is like after the first practice. And I was like, "Son, you're not going to get a trophy till the very end of the season." And then like the next practice or the next game, "Hey, Dad, what color is the trophy going to be? How big is it going to be this season?" And eventually I had to sit him down. I said, "Son, it's not about the trophy. It's about what the trophy represents. It represents your hard work, your teamwork, your camaraderie. The trophy is a visible representation of all the work you put in this soccer season." And I think that is kind of an encouraging story, or a contextual story, to how we should be thinking about our fundraising goals. Let's not be so obsessed with the number, but let's link it back to a tangible school improvement. Let's make sure everybody knows, if I'm going to give money to my parent group, to my school, then I know what we're raising money for and how that will impact me as a parent and my students. Number 2, ensure admin, teacher, program, and communication alignment. I'm not going to harp on this anymore, but that is absolutely critical, that they are your biggest fans and spokespeople for any campaign that you're running. And then this is super practical, but just, what worked last year in terms of messaging and timing may not work this year. So one thing that we're encouraging most of our clients to do in our schools to do is extend the length of the campaign by a couple weeks, just to make sure communication is sinking in and getting to parents. There's just obviously a lot of crazy going on right now in terms of people having to do e-learning with their kids and their jobs, and often things can be missed. So let's just make sure we've created maybe a longer runway to raise those funds and to get things moving. And then lastly, really, and this is a no-brainer as well, but I think it is a challenge and a huge obstacle right now, is whatever your campaign is, just making sure all families and students can participate. This has been a challenge for us with on-campus programs right now in campaigns, is we're seeing, even if a school is on campus, 10, 20, 30% of the students may still opt to do e-learning. And how do we engage those families as well? And again, historically, we would do fun runs outdoors, large events, big tents and tunnels and wind feathers. And obviously e-learning students can't participate. So one of the things that we did this year, and I'm really proud of my team because they've just done a fantastic job with this, is started a partnership, formal partnership with the Just Dance. If you all are familiar, maybe your kids have it on their Xbox or PlayStation, maybe you do it with them, but the Just Dance product. And we knew we needed to do something that works in the classroom, or even if maybe in the gym, that we can zoom in other students and Skype in other students that are e-learning. But if you just say, hey, we're doing a dance event, some students might not really know what is that going to look like. But when we said, hey, we're doing a Just Dance partnership with Booster, students really came alive with that and really loved the concept. So we're seeing a lot of success with this. So just showing you this to say, hey, get creative. What are ways that you can engage all students? And of course, if there's a way that we can help host an event or facilitate this for you, we'd love to do that. All right, so let me merge these two, campaigner and channel, just to give you some insights, because these are closely connected. So we're seeing this, and this is really encouraging. So when we compare again, that really gold standard metric for us is how a school did last year compared to how they're doing in this pandemic. Families are 53% more likely to share, and meaning share the link, share on social media, share emails and texts. They're 53% more likely to share in this season than they did last year. This is big for our engagement platform. Families that ask 3 or more sponsors have increased 80% year over year. So all the families that participate in our campaigns, if you slice and dice those by who are those that ask 3 or more sponsors to give to their local school, those number of families have increased 80%. And with the lack of on-premise engagement and events, we've just seen social media be a true gateway to getting the word out to parents, to engaging parents. And we've seen parent groups, sometimes parent groups kind of keep a social media account going, post occasionally, but we've seen parent groups that really engage parents through social media see a lot of success. And so if you haven't been using your social media accounts for your school or for your parent group, really encourage you to do that. And then this is let me talk about this for a second, because this is really important. This is something that we were actually tracking before the pandemic, and it really accelerated now in the pandemic. But there's something in e-commerce called cart abandonment, and it's a metric that the Amazons and any e-commerce site track, and it's basically how many people get on your website to buy something, whether that's through an app or on their laptop, and add something to the cart but never follow through with actually purchasing it. And on a lot of sites, that can be as high as 50 to 80% of things that are added to the cart actually aren't followed through and purchased. And so, of course, marketers at those companies want to know why and want to understand that. And one of the reasons why it's increased is because people are seeing, people are getting used to and accustomed to these really sleek and fast and fun apps that, integrate Apple Pay and all the technology. So many of you are used to this, right? Ordering Amazon Prime or groceries, it needs to be super easy. Well, in the fundraising space, we're seeing this as well, because most fundraising platforms aren't as well built as what you see with Amazon. There's a reason why probably Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook and Steve Jobs didn't get into the fundraising industry. They got into the tech industry. And so there's been this kind of being left behind nature with a lot of these fundraising platforms. And so we poured a lot of money into our platform to try to accelerate that, to convert people so that they can be sitting in car line, again, in park, hopefully, sitting in car line, waiting for their students to come out, and in 15 seconds or less can make a donation. And so this is something that's really important as the rest of the world goes to kind of 1-2 clicks on their iPhone. A fundraising platform needs to be just as good as that. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So what can we learn from this? What can you learn from this? Best practices. The big thing right now that we're seeing success with is changing your call to action to families from giving, hey, give to the local PTA, give to your local school, to sharing. Hey, we're not asking you to give, it's a hard time, but can you share with people that may be willing to give, whether that's a coworker, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent. Change the narrative to sharing instead of giving. That helps, bridge some of the awkwardness and sensitivity that people may have about, should my school be asking for my money right now? So really go after sharing versus giving. You all talk about this often, I'm sure, the 80-20 rule and principle, that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. So just a reminder, especially in this time, to be calling your 20%, your campaigners, those people that are giving more than others, and just encourage them and thank them and encourage them to keep sharing if they have that momentum. And then this goes back to the cart abandonment step that I was just talking about, but really make sure you've modernized your giving platform, that it's easy and fun to use. That's really critical in these times for the reasons I've already expressed. So again, as I mentioned before, Booster has really evolved from being the fun run people to now really putting on a wide variety of campaign types. If you would like to just use our tech platform as a standalone service, we actually do that now. So we'd love to set up a call with you where you can just use our tech platform as kind of that base for your fundraiser. So here's just an example. This is fun. And those of you familiar with our program have seen this before, but every year our amazing content team puts together and films what we call a student star video. And again, when I say make it easy and make it fun, families from your school can log in really easily. They can upload a picture of their child or all their children. It will auto upload and convert this into a video that then they can share on Facebook. They can email to friends with their student embedded into it. And so it's a really great, fun way for people to want to share, right? For them to want to fundraise, and for students to really think it's awesome to see their face. It looks like it's on the news, like it's going viral or something like that. So it's really, really cool concept. All right, coming to a close here. Capital, just some insights we're seeing. Again, number one, this economy, if you turn on the news, you'll probably hear this said once or twice within an hour, but we are facing a K-shaped economic recovery. Back in March when all this hit, you remember the president and economists were talking, is it going to be a V-shaped economy where it goes down and then it quickly comes back up? Is it going to be a U-shaped where it goes down for a while and then eventually comes back up, economic recovery? Were other terms thrown out. Is it going to be a swoosh where it goes down and takes a little bit longer to come back? And what they're saying now is it's a K-shaped economic recovery, which ultimately means there's industries and businesses and families that are really thriving in this time. And you probably have them and know them. It may be you, whether it's tech or healthcare or groceries or food service. We're seeing some really good uptick there in America. Or if you're maybe in transportation or hospitality, right, we're seeing really industries be severely disrupted and impacted. And so this goes back to kind of really explaining why participation is down, because there's people that are less willing to give for the reasons I just mentioned. But the average donation, this is encouraging, those that are willing to give are actually giving more. They're giving 15% more this year. So the money is out there. It's just about finding who has the money in this season. And this is encouraging too, because this is the lag effect and the consequence of what I just talked about with changing the narrative from giving to sharing, is that 66% of donations in our campaigns are coming from non-parent givers versus parents, which that's a really high percentage that we really take pride in, because again, it's spreading that fundraising load, not just on the parent shoulders, but to the larger community, where there's more money available. And then going back to companies that are struggling versus companies that are doing well, we're seeing corporate matching is up 10% year over year, greater than 10% year over year. So we're seeing the utilization of that. As you know, a lot of companies have corporate matching programs, and we have in our platform, makes it really easy. We have a partnership with Double My Donation, which is a tech service that embeds right into our tech platform, where a family or a donor can just look up their company if they're eligible for a corporate match, and then it matches it right there. So it's a really cool feature that utilizes and takes advantage of some of these companies that are given more money in this time. So best practices, real quickly, don't be afraid to ask. Money is on the sidelines. I know in these times it feels weird to ask when the country is in a recession, and fundraising can feel like the F word to many people right now. But there is money out there, and so don't be afraid to go get it. Again, not just for your present needs, but there will be future needs. So really take advantage of the money that's out there on the sidelines. Pursue corporate match programs and local business sponsorships. This is something that's really important in these times, is that we really find a great partnership with our local communities and businesses that want to support the school, but also, again, through corporate match features like I just talked about. And then lastly, I'll just end with this, a reminder for those people that do give to take the time to express gratitude. There was a survey done a couple years ago that showed that people would be twice as likely to give the next year if they just got a simple thank you note. And so a reminder, even in the busyness and the chaos, that we should be taking the time to thank our donors and to express gratitude to them who are ultimately, again, fueling our cause, fueling our mission, and why we do what we do. So again, you have a cause, then you decide on your campaign, you find those campaigners that can multiply it, you use great channels, and then hopefully if you do all four of those right, the capital will be coming through and ultimately allow you to create that virtuous cycle of having an impact on the next generation. And hopefully these slides and resources gave you some new, fresh ways to think about how you fundraise locally. So we're going to give you an email. I believe Amaya or Caroline will send this out, but there is a website with all of these resources. So if you want access to my keynote slides that I just shared, you can download those. There's some checklists, templates that you can use to kind of go further into the process with fundraising for your school. We've also aggregated what we've seen with all of our 900 clients this fall. What are some common things schools are raising money for right now? So if you're thinking through some ideas of what we could raise money for in this season. And then also, if you complete a survey, I would love some feedback on what you learned and get some information from you. If you complete the survey, I will send you a CTW shirt. See behind us, our cause, our purpose. See behind me is to change the world. Booster, we believe we exist not just to raise schools money, but to do it in a way that can change the world and have an impact on the next generation. And so we have a spirit wear organization called Booster Spirit Wear that can do custom shirts for your school as well. but we'll send you a cool CTW shirt if you complete that survey. And then you see there my contact information. If you would love to talk further, I know we're going to move into Q&A here in a second, but if you would love for myself or some of our team to talk to your school about some options, or if you're a state leader and you'd like for me to do a presentation like this to your local chapters, I'd be more than willing to do so. Just reach out directly. There's my information. So thanks again for having me. I hope this was helpful, gave you some new ways to think about fundraising in these crazy times, and a reminder that we're all in this together. Over to you, Amaya.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. For everyone who's with us, I've put the link into the chat. If you'd like to ask any questions, please feel free to put them there in the Q&A. I did have one that I thought might be helpful. You talked a lot about the relationship between our PTA leaders and school administration. Do you have any tips about establishing or improving, maintaining that relationship, especially in a virtual world?
Great question. What's so great about the partnership with the PTA and the administration is you guys ultimately all want the same thing. You want the next generation to flourish, and obviously for the PTA, that means specifically your kids that are at the school. And so I think going back to the cause and going back to some of the longer term needs, the shorter term needs are obviously obvious to everybody, but some of the longer term needs, I think just starting with that posture of, hey, we want to work together and help each other. And then just constant communication. I know in these times that's hard, but updates, meetings, inviting the principal into the board meeting, or sometimes the PTA helping out in staff meetings. We've seen that work successful. So ultimately just a posture of leaning in, saying, hey, we all want the same thing, and the PTA is here to help. And so let's just dialogue around ways that we can have an impact in this season.
Awesome. So we have a question from Salwa. Can you perhaps speak to the relationship between a parent organization and an outside company for fundraising, how that relationship works, best practices that the parent organization or PTA should implement when they use a third-party fundraiser?
Yeah, and this is how we've evolved as an organization is 18 years ago when we started this company, we were full service, do it all, bring a team of 3, 4, 5 on campus and take all the work off your shoulders. And over the years, and because of that, we were able to charge, a good price, but a high price because of all the work that we were doing. And over the years, we had, parent groups and PTAs in particular say, hey, we have a great volunteer base. We feel like we can do some of this work. And so one of the things that we pride ourselves in the industry is being the most flexible and customizable. And our fee structure pricing works in tandem with how much work you all want to do versus how much work we're going to do. And the transparency in that we've seen work, we think it's been fantastic. And our school partners would say that too, because school partners, if parents sometimes will push back, right? Wait, you're bringing in an outside company to do this fundraising campaign, and they're charging X% depending on the tiered service. And as a parent group, you can say, hey, the reason why we chose this tiered service is because we don't have enough volunteers to do everything our own. So would you like to volunteer so that next year you can do a lesser percentage? And so the collaboration has worked really well with the way we try to customize our campaign to not just hit your fundraising goals, but also hit your volunteer engagement levels where they are. Hope that makes sense.
So we have similar questions from Teresa and Heather about approaching local businesses and community partners. Any advice on how to message that to them, and especially when schools are in low income areas or Title I areas, how to build that relationship and how to really include the community?
Yeah, so one of the things that we seen a lot of success in, and again, sometimes in this time, smaller businesses have been hurt, more than some bigger companies. And so that's where the corporate match program can be helpful. But, often it really comes down to what we've seen be more successful than not is just the obviously face-to-face is hard right now, but calls into businesses in the area, and even having deliverables ready to show them, what great work the school is doing, the PTA is doing. And so, get away from sending emails to businesses. I think really it is picking up the phone and calling local businesses, enlisting their help. But it also is really a 365-day nurturing of those relationships. There's the I don't know who said it first, but you've probably heard the the old adage: if you ask for money, you get advice. But if you ask for advice, you get money. And I think that's just a great way to think about it. Is throughout the year, you should be just having engagement conversations with local businesses. And eventually you might need to come around and ask them for money, and they're going to say, great, we'd love to support you. But if the first time they've heard from you is to give money versus to get involved or to use their service at one of your events, then there's a high chance they're not going to say yes with their credit card right away.
And have you similarly seen this practice apply as well in low income areas, areas that serve Title I schools?
Yeah, I would say the bigger and lower income areas, often you find, and sometimes those are in more urban environments, you find some of the bigger corporations there that are looking to partner with local schools in their zip code. And so, we see that. I'm an Atlanta native. We see that with Delta, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, that are all more in urban environments. They want to do stuff in their community, and they want to provide outlets for their employees to go volunteer. Now, again, that's more of a challenge right now, obviously with COVID. But yeah, I want to be afraid to pick up the phone and call some bigger companies in the area, if you have them, and see if they want to participate.
Another question about creating a campaign that actually supports an end goal. What's a good practice for schools that aren't even sure what they actually need the funds for? So if the administration isn't saying here's our end goal of what we would like to achieve, how does the PTSA actually set up that goal?
Yeah, that's a great question and challenge, and that's what we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of schools say we don't need the money right now. We are seeing some schools say we think we will need the money and we'll fundraise, but then again, to your question, if you don't have a clear outcome, then your fundraising efforts aren't going to be as effective. So, I think categorically, coming up with how you want to use those funds. We've seen a lot of our school clients do that we know. I think everybody would admit every school needs a bigger tech budget right now. So saying, we're gonna raise X amount of dollars for added tech budget, new technology. It doesn't have to be quite as specific. And we see principals get on board that all the time, say, hey, I think we're good right now, but in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, we will need more money for tech. And I think that's kind of that happy medium of, you could stay broad, but if you go too broad of just, we're raising money for student enrichment or we're raising money for our students, that's a little bit too broad for these times.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Can you touch a little bit more on the virtual fundraising elements? With many of us, we're in virtual environments, both professionally, personally, educationally. And so if there are legal limits to contact in terms of in-person gatherings, what are best practices to sort of continue that relationship development and or engagement if you can't execute a fun run?
Yeah, great question. And this is one of the unfortunate reasons why it's down 60% on average in virtual environments, because it's just tough to engage families right now. But either way, there's still opportunity to bring in those needed funds in that environment. And that goes back to I think what I spoke to earlier of, if you can extend the length of your campaign. Historically, we've done our program and our campaign in 2 weeks. Now we're doing it on average probably 3 to 4 weeks, just to allow more time to get messaging home through different channels. So you're going to have to tap into all those channels and have a really robust strategy to use social to get to families, email contacts to get to families, getting teacher buy-in so that when they are on their Zoom classroom calls, they can make announcements about it. So it really is, how do we get to families with all these barriers that are in place? And more time helps, and more additional touch points help. We keep telling our team as they're working with schools, hey, you're just in this environment, you're gonna have to make announcements, and PTAs and parent groups and principals are gonna have to make announcements 7 times, 7 different ways, 7 by 7, 7 times, 7 different ways is just kind of our quick way of saying it takes a lot of communication through a lot of different channels in this time. But it can be done. And the 60% number may scare you, and you may say, gosh, what should we even fundraise? But if the engagement level is high from admin and teachers, we've seen virtual schools that raise the same amount as they did last year when they were fully on campus.
That's great. Well, Stephen, do you have any concluding remarks before we wrap up?
No, I'll just say thank you again, Amaya, Caroline, for having us. Again, you'll see the link there for everybody that's on right now or is going to watch it later. To feel free to go in and fill that out. And we're just grateful to have the opportunity in this crazy time to come alongside schools all across the nation. The need is tremendous and at times overwhelming, but I just encourage you all to keep doing what you're doing. It's worth it, and it's needed in this time. So a big thank you.
Well, thank you very much. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Booster, for being part of the discussion on building a framework to better strategically fundraise. This Learning Lab has been recorded and will be posted to National PTA's website shortly if you'd like to share some of the content. The link in the chat will also have the ability to download the slides as well as to take a survey that will then allow you to fill out a form for your t-shirt to be mailed directly to your door. If you did fill out the t-shirt aspect of the registration form initially, please fill out this link again. My apologies for the technical challenges there. We'll be following up via email about this particular Learning Lab and future Learning Labs. We would appreciate you all sharing this information with your fellow PTA parents as part of a benefit of your membership. Thanks so much. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.